In the early 1980s, Ontario, Canada was undergoing a recession very similar to what happened in the last few years. And again, youth were the group that probably were most impacted. And I think that at that time, the Ontario government's response to that was to establish youth employment counselling centres throughout Ontario. And our organization for the first few years ran under the auspices of the John Howard Society. I was an employee at John Howard when all this was happening, and I was asked to be the first director of the organization. So we opened our doors in April of 1983, not knowing if we'd be around 1 year or 6 months, whatever, and here we are 30 years later.
When I arrived, we were still on Wellington Street. November 1987, there were 8 staff. We had, I think, probably 5 offices and all crowded in, shared space, you know, so that we were always talking to each other, always sharing client stories. It was unbelievably busy.
But I was hired to run a life skills program, and it was the beginning of a whole new chapter of my life. I think in my first 5 years at Keys, I had 14 different positions. I loved every single minute of it, and it's wonderful for me that I still run into the people who took part in that program 20 years ago, and I'll see them on the street every once in a while, and they'll say, "Keys changed my life." And that's so true of many of the programs, with so many of the clients we had at Keys over the years.
I think in those early years, we all did everything. You know, if the receptionist was sick one day, I would sit at reception if I had to. We all did all aspects of our jobs here, and I think a lot of that attitude is carried over through the years. I have a number of people that I continue to work with that I've worked with for over 20 years here at Keys. And again, they bring that history, that culture of service, I think, to what we do here at Keys. And that has been, I think, the core of this organization is service. We do what we need to do to support the people in this community that are facing unemployment.
I started out as a client here at Keys many years ago. And I had very supportive counselor, as I think, you know, most people do when they come here. And I wanted to do something different. I was working full time, but I wanted to do something different. And they actually had an opening for just a temporary reception position, and I applied and got it. I had such a supportive work environment, wonderful, encouraging people, and so I decided to go back to university and get my degree, which I did while I worked here as well.
My very first day at Keys, I was a placement student coming out of the Behavioral Science Technology program, and I showed up, you know, sort of ready for my interview, and immediately my first thought was, this is somewhere I'd like to work. Looking back now, we were a staff of, I think, probably 12 or 15 folks, and now thinking that we're 60 plus people, a lot has changed, but you know, I think the first sort of feelings that I had when I came into Keys, I still have all those.
I think in those early days we were really naive, but I think that worked to our advantage. We believed we could do almost anything. So in the early days, for example, we saw a lot of young people who were, say, student council presidents, who were, real achievers in schools, getting these opportunities to go on programs like Canada World Youth and these international development education programs. We weren't seeing the young people that we were working with having those same opportunities. So one of the things that some staff at Keys did, and I was part of that group, but again, probably the leadership came even from other staff, was to develop our own program called Youth and Community Development Education Project, where we did projects where we sent young people to both Jamaica and India on community development work. We also, in those early years, in the very early years, used theatre quite extensively in terms of allowing young people to get the message about who they are and where they wanted to go through the medium of popular theatre. So again, we were doing some really crazy, innovative things in those early years in that area too.
It's a sense of family here. I mean, when you've been at an organization for 18 years, there must be something that keeps you going. I think the people that work here, to a person, have a great deal of integrity and passion for what they do. And when you start to feel that slipping from yourself because you're getting tired or you're dissuaded or discouraged for whatever reason, you can pull on your colleagues, and that's something I find that is not always really present in other jobs.
I remember feeling very nervous because it was a brand new environment. I'd left an employer I'd been with for 5 years. It was a great, exciting jump, but you're still terrified. But by the end of that first day, I felt part of the team. I was so welcomed, and the idea that you've been brought in and your ideas are valued and respected and you're encouraged to think of new things. You know, probably within the first couple of months of being here, Michael was sending me to a focus group to share my thoughts with people from the province, which is very empowering. The work is very meaningful, but I feel like I can run with an idea and I'll be supported, and I feel like coming up with new ideas is encouraged, which is exciting. They don't want robots.
I just love to help people, and I enjoy the change that we could, I might be able to provide to one of my clients. And again, I love, spreading the word throughout the community of what the services Keys offers. And it's great service. I'm pretty proud of this service, so I enjoy that. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of what I do.
The fondest or best memories I have are the clients that I worked with that had huge changes in their life while I was working with them. I don't like to take credit for that because I think, I believe that we just provide tools and it's up to the client to pick them up and use them. But sometimes providing those tools, if they didn't have them before, can make a huge difference in a client's life.
I love that we get to look at what our community needs. We get to build a service to meet that need. I love that I have a role in helping bring those programs to us and seeing them through and seeing the results. I also love that our work is never done and that we need to continue to strive towards serving our community.
About 10 years or so into our existence, maybe even less than that, we made a conscious decision to take all the transferable skills we had in the area of employment counseling for youth to transfer it to a broader cross-section of the community. So in the early 1990s, we made a conscious decision to serve the whole community. So we still have a youth wing, we have student wing, but we also have an older worker wing, we have working with persons with disabilities, and immigrant services is a big part of what we do today. So we're dealing with the whole community now, whereas in the early years it was strictly a youth employment centre in terms of services.
It's great to see the staff working as a team and moving forward with projects, and as a board member we are able to support that. So that's amazing. Being there for the organization, truly making a difference for the people that work there and supporting them in moving forward is really what makes it for me.
Keys and Michael are they're so intertwined together. You can't really think of one without the other. Michael was just cutting edge and realizing that there were gaps that weren't being filled, and there was support, but he, I think, was really pivotal in pulling all of those supports together locally, regionally, and even beyond the province in terms of trying to make a difference for these young people.
Well, you could probably see when you said his name, I smiled. And I think that a lot of people in Kingston know and appreciate Michael for the work that he is doing. Particularly what I would like to say about Michael is that he is the most collaborative person I know. Increasingly we are asked to collaborate with other agencies, but Michael did that just out of his own being long before the government was asking for that. Just because he thought it made sense. And I think he is well known in Kingston for taking on projects, but for doing it in a collaborative way, and that has made a big difference for Keys.
And what was interesting about Michael, I remember when I first started here, as I said, there was just a small group of us, and clients would come in the door, and our reception area was sort of an employment resource center, and offices were right there, and clients would knock on any door, and sometimes it was Michael's, and they had no idea he was the executive director because he didn't behave that way. He helped people when they walked in the door, and they felt so supported by him, and it didn't matter, and the reality was it didn't matter who you talked to at Keys in those days, you got the support you needed. But for Michael to have come from that sort of front line grassroots perspective and to have grown and led the organization through growth, I think he's just done an outstanding, exceptional job.
I think Michael has always been rooted in the community. I mean, we're a community-based organization. I think for many organizations that has shifted over the years. You know, when you start to have almost 100% of your funding come from government, you can very quickly lose sight of where your roots are. Michael has never allowed that to happen at Keys. So we're always trying to be innovative and creative, and a lot of that creativity comes from his own passion to make sure that we truly have an inclusive workforce in the Kingston community, and that everything that we've done has somehow come back to our mandate. So we don't say, oh, there's a pot of money there, let's go get that. It's always, is this still who we are? Is this where our expertise lies? Does this fill a need? So he always keeps us focused on those things, and I think that has made the organization really strong. And it also makes the staff feel connected because we truly have the same vision and we know what it is and we can articulate it.
I think there's always going to be the need for community-based employment services. No matter how good the economy is, there's still going to be people who are needing that support in that transition from either school or unemployment back into the workforce. And I want us to be there as a solid, responsive organization.